Okay, hello, fellas. Apologies that I missed last week. It was simply not a good day. But what matters is we are back, we are here, and we're actually going to be covering something that someone had commented and asked for. We're going to be talking about Aberrant Sorcery today, the subclass for the Sorcerer. And the first one that's actually listed here, there's a list. I think it's just alphabetical, but yes, today we will be talking about the Aberrant Sorcerer, wielding unnatural psionic power. This is well, that's what it is. It's your psionics. It's similar in a way to the Great Old One Warlock, but wholly different, I think, in my opinion. I think that psionics is something that I feel kind of strange about. Hi guys, this is Editing Jin. Normally I don't edit these videos, but I felt like I wanted to add something in. I think a lot of the times in this video I do talk about the strange relationship between a true Psion subclass and this aberrant, strange, far world creature. It occurs to me the subclass is called Aberrant Sorcery. I still think it's kind of lame that you don't really get to choose between an aberrant far realm sorcerer or a true psionic. But I just wanted to kind of have that forward before I say I talk about the relationship in a bit of a strange way, so just a heads up. I think that it's weird that they never actually added a psionic class. Back in 4th edition and 3.5, there were these psions, there were many different types of, well, I shouldn't say many, but, there were separate classes for something like this. And I think that, well, I know for a fact that in 2014 they tried to play test one. And I think ever since then they've sort of just brushed psionics to the side and decided to make it subclasses. These are things like your Psi Warrior Fighter, your Soul Knife Rogue, and your Aberrant Sorcerer. So I think that without too much delay, why don't we just go ahead and get into it? Aberrant Sorcerer, it's kind of interesting because it does inhabit the same sort of space as Great Old One Warlock, as I've mentioned. It uses lots of enchantment spells. It sort of draws strangely from the concept of the far realms and things like that. Many enchantment illusion spells, things such as like Arms of Hadar, Everd's Black Tentacles, Hunger of Hadar, and we'll go over those more specifically later. But definitely a lot of options there. With the flavor here, it's like, oh, you're exposed to a psychic wind from the astral plane. I do think it's a little interesting. I think that as we get later, I'll discuss it more, but a lot of the flavor of this class is, it's very much less so psionics, and it kind of seems to touch on the influence of a far realm great one. We'll get to that in a bit, though. First thing that I would like to talk about, though, is this subclass comes to you at level 3. This is new in 2024. Back in 2014, sorcerers would get their subclass at level 1. It was part of your background. You had some sort of spark in your life that perhaps led you to your life adventure. And I think I might have expressed in the Warlock video, but with sorcerers, I don't necessarily mind the flavor aspect of them getting their subclass at level 3. I think that you can still write the same sort of subclass or the same sort of background you would for any other sorcerer. Perhaps let's take the example of a psychic wind from the astral plane. Perhaps it doesn't manifest in your character really until you get into these stressful situations, these life-threatening moments that lead up to reaching that level 3, and then only then does it truly manifest in this more specified way. So I don't necessarily hate that sorcerer gets her subclass at level 3. I think it's a little I do think the homogenization of everything at level 3 for their subclass is a little strange, but I don't hate it for Sorcerer. So, similar to the Paladin and the Warlock before, we are getting spells. Now, spell lists for Sorcerers are very important. You can see that you always have these spells prepared. These spells are always ready for you to use. You get 5 spells at level 3. If you look at the Sorcerer the Sorcerer chart, at level 3 you have 6 spells. So at this point you are effectively doubling the amount of spells that you have, which I think is kind of crazy. Sorcerers historically are very much specialized into their spells. They fully devote themselves to certain types of spells and augment them with their meta magics. And now with these lists, the scope of spells that they can take is so much wider. And even as you scale up, you reach level 5, you're getting 9 spells. And mind you, I do hate the way that they've changed the nomenclature, because sorcerers don't prepare spells in the same way that a wizard or a cleric does. They know spells. When they level up, they gain spells. So I think it's just very, very strange to call it a prepared spell when it's not. It's a spell that you know. It's a spell that you don't have to prepare in the morning because you know the spell. You will always have that spell with you. You will always know that spell. So I don't know. I think it's very strange. But yeah, you can see that you start with getting 5 spells. Well, 4 spells and a cantrip here with Mind Sliver. And then it just increases by 2 every 2 levels, which does afford you quite a large variety with what you can do as a character. And these spells are pretty good in my opinion. I think that there will be some overlap with the great old one Warlock, as I said. But I think we're going to have to talk about it in a different light, as a sorcerer is a full caster. They do not only have 2 spells per short rest, they have a full array of spell slots that they refresh on a long rest. They also, have things such as their sorcery points, which they can convert to spell slots. They have quite a few different options as well. You get Sorcerous Restoration to regain these sorcery points. We'll see later that there's going to be an alternate. So definitely we'll be approaching this with a different lens. So let's get started. And this is sorted in alphabetical order, but I'm just going to go in terms of what level they are. So you start with Mind Sliver. It's a cantrip. It's an intelligence saving throw. Most creatures, I don't think that they really have high intelligence saving throws, or they're not really spec'd or particularly good at intelligence saving throws. So I think that Mind Sliver it's pretty reliable. As long as you're doing the correct sorcerer thing and increasing your dexterity, and of course with the help of innate sorcery, increasing your DC by 1, being able to hit Mind Sliver is pretty consistent. And what's nice about Mind Sliver, and something you'll kind of see with a few of these spells, is that when you do hit a creature with it, they subtract a d4 from the next saving throw before the end of your next turn. It works really well, both for yourself and with your party. If you tell your party that you intend to use something pretty strong on it next turn, something like a hold person or a dissonant whispers, anything like that, it can kind of combo into your own game plan pretty well. But it also works really well with allies. If you are a sorcerer and perhaps you have a battle master. I feel like I've said this a few times. But yeah, if you have a battle master or a barbarian or anything else that kind of targets these saving throws, be them strength or dex, or even other casters, maybe you have a bard that will target their charisma or wisdom saving throws, having Mind Sliver is pretty useful. If you're going straight for damage, you probably won't use Mind Sliver a lot. Innate sorcery also gives you advantage on your attack rolls. So you might still just use firebolt. Sorry. You might use Ray of Frost. You might use other options, but adding Mind Sliver, I think, in your already pretty large repertoire of cantrips, you get 5 cantrips by level 4. It's nice. It's definitely a nice addition, and I think that it can help on multiple different fronts. Next would be our first level spells. So this is Arms of Hadar. I actually don't use this spell a lot. I've never really used this spell. It's interesting because it's exclusively a warlock spell, if I am not mistaken. Yeah, it is exclusively for a warlock. You guys can't see that, but and so with warlock, it does feel strange. It only does 2d6 damage, and it does not upcast very well. D6, of course, being one of the lowest dice you can roll for a spell. But it's a little more interesting when you have so many spells to work with. When you have a lot of spells, 4 first level spells, and, with sorcery points. It's very much a good I need to get out of here button. It does make it so that creatures cannot use reactions, and it targets strength saves. I think that's a little odd. I think if a creature is approaching you and trying to get into melee with you, their strength will be relatively high. And it's sort of, the usage of it sort of gets overshadowed by something like Misty Step in terms of I need to get away from here. And its AoE sort of gets overshadowed by other spells. Technically you do have like something like a Scorching Ray, which could be an AoE that does as much damage and lets you choose your targets. Notably, this does not let you choose targets. It is each creature within a 10-foot emanation from you. You can take Careful Spell, but then you'd have to be using a sorcery point on Arms of Hadar just to not hit your allies. So I think that Arms of Hadar is something that's sort of a marriage of get out of jail while doing damage, but it doesn't really do either of them well enough to warrant, I think, using it a ton. And this is where we sort of get into this issue of the flavor of this. Arms of Hadar, the reason it's a warlock spell is I think it's so fitting for the Great Old One. You are making a pact with a great old creature of Eld, correct? And so it sort of makes sense that you would invoke, and it says Hadar here, but flavor-wise, you can have it be your patron. And you're causing tendrils to erupt from yourself. I don't necessarily know if that fits with the idea of a psionic. It feels like there's a bit of an identity crisis in that this isn't necessarily psionic. It is the influence of the outer realms. And I think that these are two very different things. When I think of a psionic, I think of something like Kenshi from Mortal Kombat. Someone who uses the power of their mind in the various different types of kinesis to manipulate the world around them. I don't think that psionic power is bursting out of tentacles. So I do think it's a very strange option. I think that you can very easily have your psionicist be someone who has a relationship with an outer god. But I think that Arms of Hadar is weird, and you'll see it later with Hunger of Hadar, Everd's Black Tentacles. But yes, I don't know, it's just strange to me. Your other first level spell is Dissonant Whispers. We've talked about this one before, but it's 3d6 psychic damage on a failed wisdom save and forces them to move away from you. I like Dissonant Whispers. I think that it's a pretty decent spell. Fortunately, it targets one thing and it's 60 feet. And it can save you multiple times. If you have someone in your face, you'll probably be using Dissonant Whispers rather than Arms of Hadar. I don't have too much to say. I mean, it's a pretty good, consistent level 1 spell for doing damage. Your other options are going to be things like Chromatic Orb, things like Burning Hands, Magic Missile. So I think that Dissonant Whispers is not a bad choice for first level spells. It has a little control, it deals damage, it's nice. At level 2, you get Calm Emotions and Detect Thoughts. Now, Detect Thoughts is a strange one, because Detect Thoughts, it's something that some DMs love and use it as a tool for exposition, and it's something that some DMs hate, where it is something that ruins their plans and how they expect something to turn out. I personally love Detect Thoughts. I guess at this point I should probably mention that I do have a history with Aberrant Mind Sorcerer. I played in Aberrant Mind Sorcery in a campaign I'm actually currently in. They ended up switching to a Scribe's Wizard, thanks to the generosity of my DM, but I do have familiarity with the subclass. So I speak a lot with experience and having gone through playing something like this. It's actually really fun, in my opinion. I do very much like Aberrant Mind Sorcerer. But anyway, with that aside, you do get Detect Thoughts. What's nice with Detect Thoughts on a sorcerer is that you have Subtle Spell. Subtle Spell, I think, is something that sort of tracks, and you'll probably be taken on a psionicist to expand on the concept of psionics, of casting these, well, really, because psionicism isn't necessarily casting spells, right? And so I think to emulate that, you can use Subtle Spell. I don't know, it's a long discussion. But yeah, things like Detect Thoughts are very nice in my opinion. Very good for compensating for perhaps a lower wisdom, so you don't have very good insight. Very good for information gathering and social situations. Calm Emotions, I don't dislike Calm Emotions, but I think that there's going to be many things that you're going to be rather concentrating on. This is definitely a spell that you'll be using out of combat more than in combat. Now, granted, if you are fighting a dragon, if you're fighting something that does charm and frighten, having Calm Emotions in a pretty large area, 20-foot radius sphere, can be very helpful. But I do think that Calm Emotions is generally used more in something like an interrogation, right? You've just tied someone up, they're very angry about it, you use Calm Emotions, help them calm down. It's definitely one of those spells that I think it's pretty flavorful. And you'll with your limited options as a sorcerer, you'll probably never pick it up yourself, right? So being able to have it as a freebie is nice. And that's one thing, is that all of these spells are freebies, which is helpful. Next, we'll go to level 5 spells. So you get Hunger of Hadar and Sending. Now, Sending is nice because, well, you get more spell slots to use it. Rather than a Warlock of being, only subjected to 2 spell slots per short rest, eventually more, you can use Sending relatively consistently throughout the day. It's nice if you are ending the day and you have extra spell slots. You can always use Sending to update others or ask questions or things like that. I think in the same game that I played this Aberrant Mind Sorcerer, we have a cleric and she loves Sending. She loves using Sending, and it's such a useful spell, I think. I think Sending it's so nice to get it for free, because you'll always have it in your back pocket in case you need to use it. And next is Hunger of Hadar. You open a gateway to the Far Realm, a region infested with unspeakable horrors. And this sort of exacerbates what I spoke earlier of rather than necessarily being a psionic class, it's much more of a of a Far Realm touched sorcerer, which is cool in its own right. Don't get it twisted, but it's a little different. Hunger of Hadar is an awesome area control spell. It creates darkness so that they're blinded. It's difficult terrain. It's even filled with strange whispers and slurping noises, which can be heard up to 30 feet away. And it does some damage. It does a pretty decent amount of damage to any creature that starts its turn there and ends its turn there and fails their save. It's something that you kind of just drop in an area and force enemies to play around. Otherwise, they will be consumed by this void of the far realm. No, I like Hunger of Hadar. If you've ever played Baldur's Gate and you got to the first floor of Moonrise, you know just how evil this can be. This is definitely going to be your main control spell, and having it at level 5 is very useful. Having it be a 3rd level spell is very useful. Next, we'll get to our 4th level spells. You get Everd's Black Tentacles, which is kind of similar to Hunger of Hadar. Many times, I know that... I'm sorry, my Spotify keeps pausing itself. Many times, people will say, like, oh, as a warlock, because these are warlock spells. Many times, people will say, oh, you're probably just going to pick one or the other. But now you have the option for both. It's kind of nice in that with Careful Spell, you can use this and forego the initial save. It does restrain creatures, so if you're taking pot shots, you'll get advantage. And your allies will get advantage. And it's I don't know, it's pretty good. It does have the added bonus over Hunger of Hadar of allowing you and your party to shoot into it, to see the creatures inside of it, whereas Hunger of Hadar creates a zone of magical darkness. This one is more so the crowd control rather than the disruption, if that makes sense. This will restrain targets. Hunger of Hadar will blind them. The small little difference between those two. Oh, this is actually a 20-foot square, whereas Hunger of Hadar is a 20-foot radius. So, I do believe that makes Hunger of Hadar a little bigger. I could be wrong. I'm not much of a math whiz. The other spell you get is Summon Aberration. I don't know. It's kind of hard to talk about summon spells. I don't really use them. I don't much care for them. They're interesting, but you summon a guy. It's as useful as summoning a guy can be. And it's a little different, I suppose, for sorcery. You don't have things like Pact of the Chain where you can get a familiar. You don't have many ways to conjure forth a fella. So maybe you need to have something that goes and walks down a hallway and could potentially explode to 7 different traps. I'm taking a lot of time on these spells. So last we'll go over Rary's Telepathic Bond. Very good spell. I like this one. Being able to link with up to 8 creatures is very useful for over the course of an hour. If you're sneaking, it's incredibly useful. No, I like Telepathic Bond. I think it's actually one of my favorite spells. I use it a lot on my sorcerer wizard creature. And last, we probably get the first actual psionic spell with telekinesis. Telekinesis is awesome. I've gone combats where I do no damage and I just use telekinesis to not only restrain specific creatures and lift them up into the air, but also because you can transform the battlefield. You can move huge objects. If there's like a desk in the room, you can move the desk and block off certain doors or something like that. You can move bookcases, collapsing things like that in order to maybe create difficult terrain or get in the way of enemies. Telekinesis is an extremely awesome spell. I love telekinesis. And I think that you can definitely use it for so many different options. I'm a big telekinesis fan. And it fits with the concept of psionics. Okay. Enough about spells. Let's go ahead and move on to the actual class features. Could you imagine? So at level 3 you get Telepathic Speech, which is it's actually the exact same as the Great Old One. I actually have Awakened Mind pulled up here, and you can see that they're the exact same. The exact same. Let me line them up actually. Oh dang, 1 second. Let me see if I can. There we go. Yeah, you can see that they're the exact same. I think that actually the verbiage here at "it ends early" is a little different, but no, it's the exact same. So it's two-way communication with a creature that you can see within 30 feet of yourself. It lasts for a number of miles equal to your charisma modifier. You must share a language, and it ends early if you use it to form a connection with a different creature, or it lasts as many minutes as your sorcerer level. I mean, it's telepathy. It's very useful. It's very useful if you're in a situation where, you know, you need to be quiet, but you do need to communicate with someone. You see your ally kind of out of position somewhere, and you need to communicate with them rather than speaking out loud. There's a lot of different things you can do with telepathy. It's good. It's something that you'll never be upset that you have. One thing that I think is kind of interesting is you look at the Warlock spell list. You see Awakened Mind. You see Great Old One spells. Pretty much copy-paste from Aberrant Mind, right? You get Psionic spells, Telepathic Speech. You get Awakened Mind, Great Old One spells. Warlock actually does get something extra at level 3 with Psychic spells, whereas the Sorcerer does not. The Sorcerer only gets their Psionic spells, and they get their Telepathic Speech. And I think it's a little interesting. I do think Sorcerer as a class I think it's stronger than Warlock, but I think it's strange to have two very similar classes, and then this one doesn't really get anything at level 3. But that's neither here nor there. I think, in my opinion, the big meat and bones of this subclass come at level 6 with Psionic Sorcery. And I think that this is actually such a cool ability. So, when you cast any level 1+ spell from your Psionic Spells feature, you can cast by expending a spell slot as normal, or by spending a number of sorcery points equal to the spell's level. If you cast a spell using sorcery points, it requires no verbal or somatic components, and requires no material components unless you're consumed by the spell or have a cost specified to it. So one thing that's actually interesting is that back in 2014, you actually used to be able to slot out some of these spells for other illusion or enchantment spells. That's not a thing anymore. I just wanted to throw that out there. But Psionic Sorcery is awesome. It's actually so good. So at the level you get at level 6, you have 6 sorcery points, which basically means you get 2 extra castings of something like a Hunger of Hadar or Ascending. You get 6 extra castings of Dissonant Whispers, 3 extra casting of Detect Thoughts or Calm Emotion. It's a lot of extra spells that you get. This kind of turns into a way of, like, if you're not going to be using meta magics, you're effectively getting a ton of extra spell slots. With Sorceress Restoration, like I talked about earlier, you can get up to half your level spell slots back. Now, if we do the math, you can see that normally to make another 3rd level spell slot, you do need to spend 5 sorcery points. This is saving you 2 sorcery points here, a sorcery point here, a sorcery point here. It lets you churn out quite a lot of spells. In addition, if you do take Subtle Spell, you don't have to Subtle Spell this, because it requires no verbal or somatic components. It happens. You can't get counterspelled. You know, you can cast it in silence. You can cast it while gagged. You can being able to cast things such as, calm emotions while gagged can and probably will get you out of some scenarios. I think it's really good. I genuinely think this is one of the coolest subclass features, because not only is it really strong, it fits with psionicism. It fits with drawing upon this inner wellspring of your own strength to cast these spells in a way that conventionally defies how spells are cast. I think it's super awesome. I think being able to, just summon an aberration with no words is really cool. I think that it's awesome. And what's really crazy is once you get to Rary's Telepathic Bond, you're basically spending 5 sorcery points in order to have telepathy with your entire party for an hour. Honestly, that in and of itself could be like a level 14 feature. there's a world I've seen I could see where it's like an upgrade to telepathic speech at level 14. You may spend 5 sorcery points to extend this to every creature around you. So I do think Psionic Sorcery is awesome. I think it's probably the coolest subclass ability of this entire subclass, which, you know, I don't know what that'll means for the future. But it is very neat. I love it quite a lot. I think that you can do so much cool stuff with it. Level 6, you get resistance to psychic damage. Other than like other than a bard at your table telling a really bad joke, you don't run into psychic damage a lot. So this one doesn't come up too much, but you do get advantage on saving throws against Charmed or Frightened. Usually those things are wisdom saves, which you're not proficient in. So getting advantage is really nice. I don't know. There's not too much else to really say about that. I think it's really good to be able to get advantage on saving throws against those conditions, because those conditions are pretty scary. Okay. Next is level 14. And funny enough, similar to Rogue, you know, I talked about how Rogue, the difference between 3 and 9 was really rough. And it's not as necessarily bad with this because you get Psionic Sorcery. But the difference, it's 8 levels for sorcerers between their subclass thing. Like I think that's kind of crazy. I think it's kind of nuts that you have to wait 8 levels to get a subclass feature, because really, I don't think... You get Sorcerer's Restoration at 5, Sorcery Incarnate at 7, and an extra Metamagic at 10. The Sorcery Incarnate's really cool. I need to talk about the actual classes at some point rather than just the subclasses. But yeah, you go a while without getting a feature. Anyway, level 14, and this... I don't know. Sorry. I just think it's weird. I think that it's this weird marriage of psionics, and maybe I'm wrong about this. It is called Aberrant Sorcery. It is specifically called Aberrant Sorcery. So I don't know. Maybe I do have the wrong viewpoint of it. That said, level 14, Revelation in Flesh. You can unleash the aberrant truth hidden within yourself. As a bonus action, you can spend a sorcery point or more to mentally alter your body for 10 minutes. For each sorcery point you spend, you gain one of the following benefits of your choice. You get an aquatic adaptation. You gain a swim speed equal to twice your speed, and you can breathe underwater. Gills grow from your neck or flare behind your ears, and your fingers become webbed, or you grow wriggling cilia. Glistening flight. You gain a fly speed equal to your speed and can hover. Your skin glistens with mucus or otherworldly light as you fly. You can see any invisible creature within 60 feet of yourself that is behind total cover. Your eyes also turn black or become writhing sensory tendrils. And worm-like movement. Your body, along with any equipment you're wearing or carrying, becomes slimy and pliable. You can move through any space as narrow as 1 inch. You can spend 5 feet of movement escape from non-magical change to the grapple condition. I don't know. I think a lot of these are gross, really. I think this is one of those things I would talk to my DM and be like, maybe can we stay away from this? But yeah, I think that it's interesting. I think that, I mean, factually, these are all strong. I mean, Glistening Flight is casting Flight. It's using 1 sorcery point to cast water breathing and swift swim, or what? That's not a spell. Flight on yourself, you know. A lot of really strong things that'll come in handy whenever they do come in handy. You're probably going to be using this on almost exclusively Flight at this level. Being able to fly and hover is really cool. It's just a bunch of different buffs. There's not much to really say. And I feel bad that there's not much to really say. But yeah, it's just really useful things. Granted, by this level, I almost feel like for some of these you'll have magic items that'll compensate for it. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of, it's nothing to complain about. I would never complain about having these. I think it's just the flavor of it I don't like. And I think I'm kind of coming to the conclusion that, like, it kind of sucks that if you want to play as psionic, you're subjected to having to turn your eyes into writhing sensory tendrils. But yeah, I don't know. Revelation in Flesh is cool. It's very useful. You'll probably find a lot of use out of it. But last is level 18, Warping Implosion. You unleash a space warping anomaly. As a magic action, you teleport to an unoccupied space you can see within 120 feet of yourself. Immediately after you disappear, each creature within 30 feet of the space you left must make a strength saving throw against your spell to save DC. On a field save, a creature takes 3d10 force damage and is pulled straight towards the space you left it. Any in an unoccupied space as close to your former space as possible. On a successful save, the creature takes half as much damage only. Once you use this feature, you can't do so again until you finish a long rest, unless you spend 5 resources once restore your use of it. I think this is such a... I don't like this capstone. No, okay, yeah. In a vacuum, it's awesome. Especially if you use it with Quicken spell. You slurp everyone up into a crowd, and you drop your, meteor swarm on them. In practice, it's each creature within 30 feet, so unless you're completely isolating yourself from your party or actively staying 30 feet away from them, it's so risky to use this, because then you force your party to make these strength saves. And granted, if you have a barbarian, it's pretty good. But chances are you're probably within 30 feet of your cleric who's casting an emanation spell. You're probably close to your other casters, things like that. And they don't have good strength saving throws. So they're probably going to end up failing this. I think that when this works, it works really well. And it's pretty darn cool. But I struggle to really see when it will work perfectly in that situation. I struggle to see a situation where you are completely jumped by enemies and you are not within 30 feet of allies. Now, on the flip side, perhaps you want to hit your allies. Perhaps you want to slurp everyone up so they are within melee range of your marshals. That is an option. But I don't know. It's just like thinking of the positioning you'll have to do, and it's definitely a reward for being big brain. But I think that it's thinking of... I just wish for level 18, it's each creature of your choice. I just think it would make it so much better if it was each creature of your choice. I don't understand why it's not. I think that... Oh my god, I'm sorry. That's my chair. I think that when Warping Implosion works, it's awesome. And the idea of it is awesome. I'm sorry. I think the idea of like, oh my god, I'm getting jumped. And then you teleport somewhere else. And then you quicken a fireball and you just launch it at them. Or god, like a synaptic static, right? I just think in practice, you're not going to find that happening a ton. But yeah, that's about it for the Aberrant Sorcerer. I do kind of retain the fact that I wish that it was separate. I wish that the Aberrant Sorcerer wasn't necessarily the Psionic subclass. I really just wish that there was a Psionic. And I don't know, maybe some of the stuff I said earlier in the video doesn't make a ton of sense. It's called Aberrant Sorcery. Not Psionic Sorcerer, but yeah. But yeah, that's about all I've got today. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys quite liked the video. And yeah, thank you guys. I'll catch you all later. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Leave a comment if you guys want to see anything else, though. Okay, bye.